Hello everyone, I am Dr. Kesari. Today we are going to learn about inflation and unemployment from two perspectives. One of them is related to A.W. Phillips perspective and followed by that of the revisions which are made by the later part of the economists like modern economists that will be related to modern perspective. Let us start with that of what exactly is inflation and unemployment. In this context, we will be able to take into consideration economics as a branch which has two components. One of them deals with microeconomics, the other one deals with macroeconomics. Nowadays, macroeconomics is one of the important fields in economic study. Let us go with that of macroeconomic studies, the various aggregated dimensions of work in the geographical boundaries of any economy. The study of a macroeconomics branch is one of the most interesting branch within economic discipline. The crucial economic activities are resource maintenance, how we will be able to make use of the available resources so as to generate the largest extent of output, and then followed by the production, how the production will be improved from time to time making use of these available resources. Whatever the production which is generated, that will be able to move in line with that of a generation of a national output, which can be taken as gross domestic product. Also, it deals with that of distribution of produced output. The reason why we have produced goods is to distribute among the different people who are there in the economy so that they will be able to meet their requirements without any difficulty. And finally, we are going to consume these goods and services which are produced. It is somewhat like a circular flow which constantly operates in an economy without any interruption. In the process of this working of the economy, mostly in every economic system, we will be able to come across some of the major issues which are related to that of macroeconomics or concept of inflation and unemployment are always debatable issues for every economy, whether that economy is a highly advanced economy or maybe an economy like that of India, which is a developing economy. It is a unemployment and inflation, both are the broad indicators or variables which mainly describes the true picture of an economy, such that it is going to be a boom in the economy, or sometimes we do come across a recession. These are the fluctuations which usually happens in every economy. Sometimes, very rarely, we also do come across an equilibrium situation. But usually, an equilibrium situation is an imaginary picture which might be happening very rarely, and even if it happens also, temporarily it will be able to exist in the market. In this context, with relation to that of unemployment and the inflation, one of the traditional economists by named Phillips, A.W. Phillips, who has undertaken an extensive study taking for a period of data for more than 100 years. And then he has come to the conclusion related to that of this particular analysis. When you observe in the figure, as you will be able to notice that there is a trade-off. That is, what he has come to the conclusion was high inflation and low unemployment. Low inflation and high unemployment. As you observe the negatively sloped curve, which represents that there is an inverse relationship between unemployment rate and the rate of inflation. This he has explained with the help of certain analysis. His study, as I have mentioned, in being a New Zealand economist, he wrote a paper in 1958, which is known as the relationship between unemployment and the rate of change of money wage rates, and specifically he has taken the study with the reference to that of the United Kingdom. And in one of the articles he has published as theoretical relationship between inflation and unemployment. Subsequently, his study has discovered an inverse relationship between money wage rate changes and the unemployment in the British economy over a stipulated time period. As it was also referred that he has taken for the study not for one period, for a very longer period, nearly to the extent of more than 100 years. And finally, he found that this inverse relationship between the rate of change in the money wage rate and the rate of unemployment. He presented this negative relationship between the change in money wage rate and the rate of unemployment in the form of a specific curve. That particular curve, which we call it as the Phillips curve. Phillips also established this particular relationship curve with the help of an empirical analysis, which he proved an inverse relationship between the rate of unemployment and the rate of increase in the money supply. But subsequently, in the year 1970s, there has some other tendency took place in most of the advanced nations, especially further he has undertaken with reference to that of United Kingdom and USA. During that particular period of time, especially with reference to that of 1970s are concerned, a new phenomenon has emerged. What is that new phenomenon? In 70s, a strange phenomenon which was witnessed by these United Kingdom and USA, and there seemed to be a breakdown in the Phillips curve as he has explained. He has mentioned there is an inverse relationship, but that has been disproved by that of the subsequent economists, and in fact it was not proved during 1970s, 1980s and thereafter. So that has given a kind of a curiosity for the further economists to probe into more and more details related to that of what exactly the relationship exists between unemployment rate and the rate of inflation, which the modern economists termed it as a high rate of inflation and a high unemployment rate. The Phillips curve was criticized by especially monetarist economists who argued there is no trade-off between unemployment rate and the inflation rate in the long run. And as during 1970s, we have experienced totally a different situation that we call it as stagflation. What exactly is stagflation? Stagflation refers to whenever there is high unemployment, it is also associated with that of high rate of inflation. So that has been not brought by that of Phillips. Instead, modern economists in their study have brought this relationship, and thereby in 1970s we have come across totally a different picture as against the Phillips theory was concerned. And especially that was related to that of the long period analysis, whereas Phillips analysis was referring to that of the short period, as we will be able to look into the details related to that of how it happens in the short period and how it changes in the long period. As I mentioned, the subsequent economists, especially Milton Friedman and others, found that in the long run there is no single Phillips curve, but there are a series of short period Phillips curve which undergoes changes related to that of aggregate demand function as well as the aggregate supply function. So, in the short period As what Phillips has mentioned, there is an inverse relationship between the rise in the prices, that is inflation, and the unemployment, which does not hold good in the long period, as Phillips has mentioned. So then what is the long period analysis? That we will be able to look into the modifications which are made by the later part of the modern economists. In the long run, the Phillips curve keeps shifting downward. For example, the further economists, where they have taken the subject fields which were held out on the foundation of US data for the decades 1960 onwards. 1960s, 1970s and 1980s confirmed the existence of the Phillips curve is only in the short period, but it does not apply in the long run. The Phillips curve has been found to be relevant only if we happen to take 1960s as one independent year, or maybe one can take a few years into account. So also, if you happen to consider 1970s, it is not a continuous stretch of a longer period of 20 years. Rather, it has taken a shorter period. So also, with reference to that of 1980s, if we would have taken the entire period starting from 1960s to that of 1980s, it could have been a longer period. Whereas, Phillips' analysis is not with reference to that of the long period, but he has taken a shorter period of 1960s, 1970s and 1980s. But only when the entire unemployment and the wage rate for 1961 to that of 1993, which the subsequent economists plotted together, and they brought out a Phillips curve that keeps switching up and down in the long run and in a spiraling way. Subsequently, they found that the later part of the economists, they have come to the conclusion there exists either no relationship, or even if there exists some kind of a relationship, that is only a weak relationship between the rising prices and unemployment in the long run. The explanation which has been given by that of the later part of the economists was related to that of the supply shocks. Why does the Phillips curve in the short period has been discarded? Mainly, Phillips has not considered the extent of supply shocks. This situation really it has happened in 1970s. If you can observe carefully, you will find that adverse supply shocks in the form of fourfold increase in the prices of oil and petroleum products delivered to American company in 1979 and 1980. As we all are aware, there has been a major oil shock which took place from 1970 onwards, continued up to 1974 and even further also. The hike in the oil price by oil and petroleum exporting countries, they have formed as a group. That is, that group is referred as a cartel. Cartel of oil producing countries also brought out a rise in the cost of production of several other commodities for which oil is used as an input. Thereby, overall prices started increasing further and further. Subsequently, further oil price rise also raised the transportation costs of all the commodities and thereby shifted the aggregate supply curve to the left, resulting into less output. And since there is a less output, as due to the costs are rising due to the rise in the oil prices, producers started feeling that they wanted to produce less and less output. Since they started reducing their output, that has resulted into the unemployment. This is the logical reasoning which has been explained by that of the further later part of the economists. And now, at the new equilibrium, when the prices are rising, that is inflation is taking place. At one side, prices are rising, and simultaneously producers have already removed some number of people who are already working in their respective firms. Due to that, higher unemployment also started with that. So thereby, now we have experienced after 1970s the strange type of a phenomenon, as modern economists pointed, as rate of inflation as well as the rate of unemployment both are increasing due to the supply changes which are taking place in the economy. This is interpreted as shift in the Phillips curve. Sometimes this is also referred as demise or collapse of the Phillips curve. Now, if you can observe carefully, you will be able to come across two different types of curves. One of them is falling downwards, that is negatively sloped. This is what has been recommended by Phillips. But whereas modern economists found that the other one, which is somewhat like that of a spiraling thing, above the negatively sloped demand curve, if you observe carefully, you will understand that in 1968 to 69, the prices as well as the unemployment rate was increasing. If you can take on the horizontal axis rate of unemployment and vertical axis inflation rate, which was increasing. And then further also you could find some other changes in terms of rate of unemployment and rate of price rise. This has also been explained by that of the modern economists with aggregate demand and aggregate supply model. And especially assuming that the aggregate demand is given and constant, the aggregate supply will be able to undergo changes. Why does the aggregate supply changes? It is because of the changes which are taking place in the prices of the commodities. And that has resulted in the long run price rise associated with that of the rate of inflation. And here we will be able to briefly explain about natural rate of unemployment. What is it? Natural rate of unemployment is the rate at which in the labor market the current number of unemployed is equal to the number of jobs available. These unemployed workers are not employed due to two reasons. There can be frictional unemployment or it can be the structural unemployment. As it is mentioned, what is frictional unemployment? This is the particular type of unemployment which happens due to lack of information or lack of mobility of workers in search of jobs before they are really started working. And the structural unemployment is such that sometimes it happens due to structural reasons like absence of new technical and additional skills which are needed for that of the workers, so that temporarily they will be unemployed. Here we will be able to explain about NIRU, non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, which has been explained by that of the modern economists like Milton Friedman. On OX axis, we are taking the unemployment rate and OY axis we are taking the rate of inflation. Observe carefully, at point A, we are able to come across 6% rate of unemployment, whereas inflation is 3%, which is manageable and reasonably possible for any economy. But whereas under these circumstances, you come across rate of unemployment is 6%, which is very high. That needs to be brought under control. So thereby, it is the government interference which comes into the economic system. As I mentioned, in the long run, Phillips curve is a vertical line because it is related to that of the aggregate supply. That is, the supply side of the market is concerned. And to reduce unemployment, government introduces expansionary fiscal and monetary policy measures to raise aggregate demand. What are the fiscal and monetary policy measures? One example which I would like to quote here is government will be able to provide certain incentives to that of the entrepreneurs who wanted to undertake a production, like maybe tax exemption or giving certain subsidies and so on. In addition to the fiscal measures, monetary measures also are introduced and injected in the economy. That will be able to result into reduction in the rate of interest, so that large number of producers will be able to come forward to undertake investment decisions. The consequent increase in aggregate demand will cause the rate of inflation to rise, say, around 8%, as you can observe in the particular figure, which in turn encourages the private producers to employ more people. Thereby, rate of unemployment is reduced to less than 6%. So now, because of this additional private investment due to the initiatives and incentives which are put forward by the government, like fiscal and monetary measures, now unemployment rate has been reduced from 6% to 3%. And so the new equilibrium, as you could see in the figure, is at point B. But remember, that is not going to be the stable equilibrium. It is only a temporary equilibrium. The reason being that at point B, unemployment rate is reduced. That is really a positive sign to the extent of 3%, whereas inflation is reached to 8%. Given the money wage rate, which was fixed on the basis of a 3% rate of inflation, but now under the new situation, inflation is increased to 8% rate, and so thereby workers who are already working, they are accustomed to 3% rate of inflation only, but now it is increased to 8%, which is 5% addition. At this 8% inflation rate, workers find it difficult to manage and they demand for want of higher wages. Therefore, point B is not a stable equilibrium. But the economy accepts this high rate of inflation. The main reason is at the cost of achieving the lower rate of unemployment, government has to accept some extent of inflation, which in turn conforms with that of the Phillips curve. However, the advocates of the natural rate of unemployment interprets it in a different way, as in the long run, the natural rate of unemployment is restored with a high rate of inflation due to the given reasons, which I am just trying to explain here. As prices rise, purchasing power of money reduces, that is real wage rate, and workers bargain for higher wages through the trade unions. Rise in the wage rate increases the cost of production and reduces a producer's profit. The reduction in profit implies the original motivation which prompted the private producers to expand output and increase employment, which discourages them to produce less by removing some part of the workers who are already employed. So this results into an unemployment and movement from B to C, which takes place as indicated in the figure. Now that point C, which is reflected in the figure, says that we are now back again to the original level of unemployment. Temporarily it has been removed, but subsequently when there is a high rise in the prices to the extent of more level, so thereby consumers, producers will be able to feel that higher rate of inflation is no longer existing, and due to that some more laborers who are removed from their employment. And finally, unemployment of original level has come back with a high rate of inflation. Thus, the final equilibrium is settled at point C with high unemployment followed by high inflation. This is also referred as the stagflation. So I hope it is clear to all of you. We will be able to meet subsequently in the next class with a new unit. Thank you.